Didn't see you come in. You startled me. Welcome to the Burning Bookshelf, where we talk about writing, books, art, and several other subjects that'll, stimulate the erotic parts of your brain. I'm Josh. I'll be your conductor, nay, your caboose, on this grand adventure through the paradise fields of literature. Today, we'll be talking about the pinnacle of childhood recollection, that is, Calvin and Hobbes by Bill Watterson. Come along. Calvin and Hobbes was a comic strip written by Bill Watterson that ran in the newspapers from 1985 to 1995. And the thing about comic strips is that, in the grand sort of politically correct world of art, you have low art and high art. High art being the paintings that you see in museums, the Mona Lisa, Da Vinci, the Sistine Chapel, and all that good shit that's all hyper realistic and whatnot. And then you have low art, which is where animation and cartooning and comic books and stuff like that. And as far as newspaper comics are concerned, newspaper comics have always been considered the lowest of the low art. It's always been the bottom feeding of everything, just because no one really thinks it takes any skill to do anything, and nor can it provoke big emotional responses, which is what art typically does. But Calvin and Hobbes, in this aspect, is a huge exception to this rule, and it really showed that cartooning can be something real, and it can really provoke thoughts and feelings and emotions that are much deeper than just the laughs and giggles that you get out of Zitz or Garfield and good stuff like that. So, unfortunately, as far as I'm concerned, I was not alive in 1985, and I was born at the end of 1995. Shit. So, I missed out on the train of seeing the newspaper comics come every single day and every single week, and seeing Calvin and Hobbes running in there. You read a Calvin and Hobbes comic and you get more than just a laugh or a giggle or chuckle or whatnot. You oftentimes, when you really read it, you get something to think about. There's a lot of social commentary involved in there, and a lot of philosophical views and things that you don't get out of Zitz and out of Garfield. It's something totally different and totally new, but yet embedded within the newspaper comic genre, the low of the low art, which is where it really shines. So who is Calvin and who is Hobbes? Calvin is a 6-year-old boy with the wild imagination and the carefree lightheartedness of a 6-year-old, but with thoughts, feelings, and emotions and a vocabulary that reaches much further to realms that are usually reserved for adulthood. And it's this type of juxtaposition within Calvin that makes Calvin so relatable as we, the audience, grow up with him. He recalls that lighthearted and carefree sense of childhood that we all have and that we all miss, but at the same time he speaks the language of adults. He has deep thoughts about politics and religion, and does any of this even matter, and big existential questions that we all ask as we grow up. But it's all just told through the eyes of a child, and in a way that we can all connect with, because we were all there, we were all imaginative as a child, and so we can relate to Calvin on that issue, but at the same time still learn from Calvin and learn from what he has to say and what he feels. Think of as he goes throughout his day-to-day life, he goes to school, he does his homework, and he goes home and he plays on the weekends and stuff like that. Well, he does what I really do believe most children do, given any situation, is that they take a day at school, or they take a day of doing homework or doing chores, and they make it something in their heads to something insane, just some sort of huge imaginative world that kind of entertains them as they do shit they really don't want to do. So, with the case of Calvin, he'll, in playing on the playground or something like that with all the kids, he'll pretend in his mind he's a giant Tyrannosaurus Rex, or as Calvin puts it, a Calvinosaurus. And he'll just walk around the playground like a freaking dinosaur and eat children in his mind, and that he's eating all these children so that way he'll have the whole playground to himself. But in reality, what he's doing is just pretending he's a dinosaur and then waiting and hiding until all the kids go back in from recess, and then he has the whole playground to himself, and he just kind of ditches class at 6 years old. So it's all things like that. It's more like he has the imagination that we all have as kids, but he does things with those imagination that we could only wish we could do. I guarantee you, if I could stay past recess and just hide out and then have the whole playground to myself and skip class, I totally would have, but I did not have the guts to do it because I knew my parents would fucking kill me. Like, I just knew. But Calvin, as like almost like a 6-year-old role model, does the things that I wish I could do but never got to do. And in fact, I say it's the pinnacle of childhood reminiscence, in that it makes me want to be a kid again and want to go back and do all that shit that I never could do because I was way too afraid to do it. And that's something that I've always really admired about Calvin. Then we have Hobbes. Hobbes is Calvin's stuffed tiger. I guess the reality of it is he is a stuffed tiger, but in Calvin's mind, Hobbes is a real person, a real entity, and he's the only one who can see him. And then on top of that, he's his best friend. And so Hobbes acts as that sort of that voice of reason in Calvin's head that says maybe this isn't such a good idea, maybe we shouldn't do this. But then he goes around and does it anyway, because in the end he's a stuffed tiger. I mean, he's gonna go for it regardless. I'm gonna scratch my eye. I hope you like that, internet. Outside of the high art, the low art, and all that good stuff, and that Bill Watterson did really, truly do something unique with the comic strip genre, he also acts as a really, really good example of what a lot of artists wish they could do. And that is in the idea of maintaining artistic integrity. To those who don't know or just call it bullshit, artistic integrity is the idea that art in a perfect world should be a free thing. It should just be art, and it should be given almost like a donated thing to the rest of the world, and that you shouldn't market on it, you shouldn't capitalize on it, and you shouldn't make money off of it. Whether or not that's something I believe in, that's another video, you know? But with Bill Watterson, he was a total, well, I'm not gonna say was, he's still alive, but he's a total recluse. He spends time in his own little world. He doesn't do interviews, he never really has, but he just likes to make his artwork and send it out. If you look up online and you're looking for like a Calvin and Hobbes t-shirt, a Calvin and Hobbes lunchbox, or a Hobbes stuffed animal, you may find it, you really may, but they're all going to be bootleg versions. You'll never find a licensed Calvin and Hobbes product, because Bill Watterson did not want any licensing, any marketing, or anything like that. For reasons that he really hasn't shared with anybody. A lot of people believe it's the whole artistic integrity thing, that he doesn't want to do that. But if you watch the Dear Mr. Watterson documentary, a lot of them speculate, which is weird how people would go into that much speculation just about a comic strip, but they often speculate that it was a control issue. You see, like, when you make your artwork, when you write a book, or you paint a picture, or you make a song, and you give it to a company to market it and distribute it and whatnot, you're essentially giving them control over your art, and you're giving them that song to do with what they will. You're giving them that book to edit it, to change things around in it. You're giving it to other people, and in a way you lose some of the control over your artwork, your time, like labors and effort and whatnot. And a lot of people believe that's what Bill Watterson didn't want to lose. He wanted to control what happens with Calvin and Hobbes, and he wanted it to stay pure in a sense. I even have a quote for you all from Bill Watterson himself, and that is, Calvin and Hobbes was designed to be a comic strip, and that's all I want it to be. It's the one place where everything works the way I intend it to. Essentially, that's hinting towards a factor of he wants to maintain control. So all that being said, you take Calvin and Hobbes, which for the people who have read it is absolutely life-changing. I know for me, it was something I grew up on, and when you're a kid, you're into all sorts of crazy different shit. But as you grow up, you take some of those and you look back and you're like, why the hell was I ever into that? Why on earth would I ever watch that? And then you have certain things where you're proud that that's what you were into as a child. For me, Calvin and Hobbes was one of those things. I never got to read the newspaper clippings because I was born in 1995 whenever the strip ended. But I did get to read the books, and ever since I was a kid, I may not have been able to understand the deeper parts of it, to understand like all the philosophies and philosophical views of things, but I was able to understand good entertainment, and they made me laugh, and that's where that started. But then as I reread them as I got older and matured a little bit, I started to see the layers and layers beneath each panel, and beneath each strip, and beneath each character. So for example, you take a strip where Calvin is ranting to Hobbes that, he's perfect the way that he is, and he shouldn't have to change himself to make anyone else feel better. If anything, the world should change and adjust to him so he might be the fullest version of him that he can be. And then next panel over, Hobbes has just disappeared, as though he doesn't want to associate himself with someone who feels that way. And it's a great example of how Calvin has these deep ideas of you shouldn't change for anybody, but yet he takes them in kind of a wrong direction. Like, yes, you shouldn't change for anybody, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't change. You change for yourself. You change because you want to become a better person. And it's through your interactions with other people where you act a certain way and other people don't like it. Well, you reflect back on that and say, oh, maybe I was being an asshole and maybe I should change myself for that. That's the way that you should change. And on top of that, he doesn't recognize that life truly is change. Change is the only constant in life, and you should be willing to change with that flow and not sit there and lay stagnant while the rest of the world adjusts and changes as the years go on. Calvin and Hobbes is something that I really think that everybody should, at the very least, pick up one book at a half-price bookstore or something like that for like $7 or $8, and at the very least just throw it in your bathroom to where when you're taking a shit or something, you're taking a poop, just crack it open and read a panel or two, or like read a strip or two, and at the very least you'll get blind entertainment, and who knows what you may discover. Is that what this comes down to, and the point that I want to make is that not only is this brilliant work, really is, and hilarious and entertaining in so many ways, but if you open yourself up to it and you really contemplate certain things that are said in the exchange of dialogue between Calvin and other said characters, is that you have something that you can learn from this book. And as far as this channel goes, the Burning Bookshelf, I want to give you things that you'll learn from if I can, and not in the typical educational way or homework and bullshit and all that good crap, but learn something. Have an opportunity to learn a little bit about yourself and learn a little bit about the world that we live in. And I think Calvin and Hobbes is a great place to start, because it won't take you long to read one. It doesn't take much to learn what Bill Watterson has to offer and the characters that he's created and the dialogue that he has exchanged between those characters. So, all that said and done, I'm going to go back to chugging this wine, this delicious, totally legit wine, and y'all go pick yourself up a Calvin and Hobbes book. Guys, I just want to take a moment to say thank you for sticking with me to the end of this video. I consider you exceptional among the rest, and you hold a very special, nay, individual place in my heart. Be sure to, give this video a cute, adorable little like, and be sure to tickle my fancy, if you will, by clicking that subscribe button. And if you'd like, you can follow me on Twitter and Tumblr, and I'll leave those links down in the crotch area. Have a great evening.